Indian billionaire's lunch is interrupted by a poor woman employee. What she said saved his life. Welcome to Billionaires and Hearts. Before we dive into today's emotional journey, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to stay updated. We'd love to hear your first impressions, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think as you watch. And if you enjoy our stories, please like and share this video with your friends. Now let's get started. Ishaan Malhotra stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his private dining room at the top of Mumbai's most prestigious hotel. The city sprawled beneath him like a glittering carpet, a view he'd seen countless times but rarely truly noticed. Today was different. Something felt off, though he couldn't quite place what. His perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders as he mechanically lifted another bite of expertly prepared food to his mouth. The taste had long since become bland, despite the chef's renowned expertise. Around him, business associates carried on their usual discussions about profit margins and market expansions, their voices a distant hum in his ears. "Mr. Malhotra," a soft voice cut through his thoughts. He turned, irritated at the interruption, to find a woman in a simple sari standing near his chair. Her presence in this exclusive space was jarring. She clearly belonged to the hotel's cleaning staff, not among the power players of Mumbai's business elite. "How did you get in here?" he demanded, his voice sharp. The conversation around the table died instantly. The woman, Lakshmi, stood her ground, though her hands twisted nervously in her sari. "Sir, I need to speak with you. It's important." Something in her eyes caught his attention. There was urgency there, yes, but also a quiet dignity that seemed out of place with her station. His security team moved to remove her, but Ishaan raised his hand, stopping them. "You have 30 seconds, he said coldly. Lakshmi glanced at the others at the table, then back to Ishaan. "Sir, it must be in private." A ripple of murmurs spread around the table. William Parker, his American investor, chuckled. "Surely you're not going to entertain this, Ishaan?" But Ishaan was already standing. Later he would question his own actions, wonder what had possessed him to follow this cleaning woman away from his important lunch meeting. Perhaps it was the mounting pressure of the merger he was negotiating with Rachel Thompson's firm. Perhaps it was the headache that had been building behind his eyes for days. Or perhaps it was something in Lakshmi's steady gaze that suggested she knew more than she should. He followed her to a quiet corner of the restaurant's entrance, away from curious ears. His security detail hovered nearby, their discomfort evident. "Speak," he commanded. "Sir, you must stop eating the food in your private dining room," Lakshmi said without preamble. Ishaan's expression hardened. "Is this some kind of threat?" "No, sir. It's a warning. I've been watching. There's something wrong with the special meals prepared for you. The way they're handled. It's not right." "You expect me to believe you've been watching my meals in my private dining room?" His voice dripped with skepticism. Lakshmi's hands stopped twisting in her sari. She stood straighter, meeting his gaze directly. "Sir, I clean that room every day after your lunch. I've noticed things. Small things at first, the wrong dishes being used, items moved from their proper places. But then I started seeing the same person lingering near your food before it's served. Someone who shouldn't be there." Ishaan's first instinct was to dismiss her, to call security and have her removed. But something made him hesitate. The headaches that had been plaguing him, the subtle metallic taste he'd sometimes noticed in his food. "Why should I believe you?" he asked, his voice lower now. "Because I have nothing to gain by lying, sir. I risk my job by speaking to you, but I couldn't stay silent. Not when—" She paused, something flickering across her face that Ishaan couldn't quite read. "Not when what?" "Not when I've seen this before," she finished quietly. Before Ishaan could respond, William appeared at his elbow. "Everything all right here, old chap? We're waiting to continue our discussion." Ishaan waved him off, his eyes still on Lakshmi. "What's your name?" "Lakshmi Sharma, sir." "Well, Lakshmi Sharma, you've made a very serious accusation. If you're wrong—" He let the threat hang in the air. "I understand, sir, but please, just be careful." She turned to leave, but Ishaan caught her arm. The touch seemed to surprise them both, and he quickly released her. "Wait, Hayu said you've seen this before. What did you mean? Lakshmi's eyes clouded with something that looked like pain. That's a longer story, sir. One I'm not sure you're ready to hear. With that cryptic response, she slipped away, disappearing into the hotel's service corridor before Ishaan could stop her. He stood there for a moment, his mind racing. The careful facade of control he'd maintained for years had just been cracked by a cleaning woman's warning. Back at the table, his associates were waiting expectantly. Rachel Thompson, the American CEO he was negotiating with, raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay, Ishaan?" He looked at his plate, the food he'd been absently consuming moments before. The headache behind his eyes pulsed. "Yes," he said smoothly, even as he pushed the plate away. "Everything's fine." But nothing was fine. As the meeting continued, Ishaan's mind kept returning to Lakshmi's warning. Who was this woman really? What had she seen? And why did he have the unsettling feeling that their paths had crossed before? The rest of the lunch passed in a blur of negotiations and small talk, but Ishaan barely heard any of it. His thoughts were consumed by questions he couldn't answer. When the others finally left, he remained in his chair, staring at the untouched food before him. After a long moment, he pressed the intercom. "Send someone to find that cleaning woman, Lakshmi Sharma. I need to speak with her again." But when his assistant returned, it was with surprising news. According to the hotel's records, no one named Lakshmi Sharma worked there. The mystery woman who had warned him about his food had vanished as quickly as she had appeared, leaving Ishaan with nothing but questions and a growing sense that his carefully controlled world was about to unravel. He stood at the window again, watching the sun set over Mumbai. Something had shifted today, something fundamental. And deep down, Ishaan knew his life would never be quite the same. The laboratory results lay on Ishaan's mahogany desk, their clinical language confirming his worst fears. Traces of arsenic, small but steadily increasing amounts, had been found in the food samples he'd secretly sent for testing. The headaches, the metallic taste. It hadn't been his imagination after all. He leaned back in his leather chair, the Mumbai skyline twinkling beyond his office windows. The mysterious woman, Lakshmi, had been right. But how had she known, and why had she disappeared so completely? A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, quickly sliding the report into a drawer. Rachel Thompson strode in, her American confidence filling the room. "Ishaan, we need to talk about your sudden interest in changing the catering service. William is concerned about the delay it's causing in our merger discussions." "The merger isn't my only priority right now," Ishaan replied curtly. Rachel's perfectly manicured fingers drummed on his desk. "This wouldn't have anything to do with that woman who interrupted our lunch the other day, would it?" Before Ishaan could respond, his assistant rushed in. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see." She handed him a worn photograph, its edges frayed with age. Ishaan's breath caught in his throat. The image showed a much younger version of himself at a community event, but it was the figure in the background that drew his attention. There, serving food to guests, was Lakshmi, looking almost exactly as she had in the hotel. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "It was delivered to reception, sir. No name, no message." Rachel leaned forward, intrigued. "Who is she?" Ishaan ignored her question, his mind racing back to that event. It had been a charity function organized by his mother, Priya, before her sudden illness had taken her from them. The same illness that had begun with headaches and a metallic taste in her mouth. "I need to find her," he muttered, more to himself than to his guests. "Find who?" Rachel pressed. "Cancel my meetings for the day," he instructed his assistant, already reaching for his coat, "and get me everything you can find about that charity event, guest lists, staff records, anything." Rachel stood, blocking his path. "Ishaan, you're not thinking clearly. We have millions riding on this merger. Whatever this is about, surely it can wait." He met her gaze steadily. "Sanahwes, Rachel, it can't." Hours later, Ishaan found himself in a part of Mumbai he hadn't visited in years. The narrow streets were crowded with vendors and children playing cricket, the air thick with the scent of spices and incense. This was where his mother had done most of her charity work, where she'd spent countless hours helping the community despite his father's disapproval. An old temple stood at the corner, its ancient stones somehow resisting the modern world's encroachment. As he approached, he noticed a familiar figure arranging flowers at the entrance. It was Lakshmi. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "You found the photograph," she said simply. "You sent it." She nodded, continuing to arrange the flowers. It was time. Time for what? To tell me who's trying to poison me. To explain how you knew. To tell me why you disappeared. His questions tumbled out, anger and confusion mixing in his voice. Lakshmi finally turned to face him. "To tell you about your mother." Ishaan felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. "What do you know about my mother?" "I was more than just a server at that charity event," she said softly. "I worked closely with Priya Madam on many of her projects. She was different from other wealthy people. She cared about us, about our community, until she got sick and died," Ishaan said bitterly. "No," Lakshmi's voice was firm. "Until she was killed." The words hit Ishaan like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" "Your mother discovered something. Something about certain business practices that would have ruined several powerful people. She was going to expose them." Lakshmi's eyes filled with tears. "I helped her gather evidence, but before we could do anything, she got sick," Ishaan finished, his world tilting on its axis. "The same symptoms you've been experiencing," Lakshmi confirmed. "I recognized the signs when I started working at the hotel. I saw the same person who used to handle your mother's food, now working in the kitchen there." Ishaan's mind was reeling. "Why didn't you go to the police? With what proof? Against such powerful people?" Lakshmi shook her head. "I tried, but no one would listen to someone like me. All I could do was watch and wait, hoping to prevent history from repeating itself." "Who?" Ishaan demanded. "Who was behind it?" "Look closely at those investing in your company's merger," Lakshmi said carefully. "Look at who would benefit most from your absence." Understanding dawned on Ishaan's face as pieces began falling into place. William Parker's insistence on using the same catering service, his constant presence at their private lunches, his reaction to Lakshmi's warning. "Why did you wait so long to warn me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Lakshmi's expression softened. "Because you weren't ready to listen. You had become everything your mother fought against, distant, cold, caring only about profit. I needed to be sure you were still the person I remembered from those charity events, the one who used to help serve food alongside his mother, who saw people as people, not assets." Ishaan remembered those days, memories he'd buried beneath years of corporate ambition. "And now? Now you're here in this part of the city, talking to a flower seller instead of attending your merger meetings." A small smile touched her lips. "Maybe there's hope for you yet." The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the temple's ancient archways. In the distance, the modern skyline of Mumbai glittered like a mirage, a world away from this quiet corner where long-buried truths were finally coming to light. "There's more you need to know," Lakshmi said quietly, "about your mother, about what she discovered, and about us." Ishaan looked at her sharply. "See," but before she could answer, a commotion erupted at the end of the street. William Parker's distinctive figure emerged from a black SUV, flanked by security guards. His face darkened when he spotted Ishaan with Lakshmi. "I was afraid you'd find your way here," William called out, his friendly American demeanor gone. "Some stories are better left buried, don't you think?" Ishaan stepped in front of Lakshmi protectively, even as he realized they were trapped between William's men and the temple wall. The truth about his mother's death was finally within reach. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes. "No more stories will be buried," Ishaan declared, his voice carrying the authority of his position but tinged with something else, the warmth and determination that had once marked his mother's speeches in these very streets. The confrontation was about to begin, and with it, the unraveling of a conspiracy that had claimed one Malhotra already. But this time, things would be different. This time, Ishaan wasn't alone. The narrow street outside the temple had fallen silent, the usual bustle of Mumbai life giving way to tense anticipation. William's security guards moved to block both ends of the street, their intentions clear. Local vendors quietly retreated into their shops, pulling children along with them. You've caused quite a bit of trouble, Mrs. Sharma, William said, his American accent now carrying a sharp edge. Or should I say, Mrs. Malhotra? Ishaan turned to Lakshmi, confusion evident on his face. She met his gaze steadily, years of hidden truth reflected in her eyes. Your mother had another child, she said quietly. One she had to give up to protect from your father's family, me. The revelation hit Ishaan like a physical blow. A sister, all this time he'd had a sister. Memories flooded back, his mother's mysterious absences, her devotion to charity work in this particular neighborhood, her fierce protection of certain documents he'd never been allowed to see. How touching, William sneered, interrupting the moment. A family reunion, but I'm afraid we can't let this little story spread any further. Your mother's secrets died with her, and that's where they should stay. Why? Ishaan demanded, his voice raw with emotion. What could be worth killing for? Billions, William replied simply. Your mother discovered evidence of money laundering through your father's company, my company's biggest competitor in Asia. With both senior Malhotras out of the way, the merger would give us control of everything. It was the perfect plan. Until I recognized you, Lakshmi said, her voice stronger now. I was just a child when you visited our house, but I never forgot your face or what happened after your visit. William's facade of calm cracked slightly. You should have stayed hidden, girl, playing with flowers and living your simple life. But no, you had to try to save your brother, just like your mother tried to save her husband's company. Ishaan's mind raced, processing everything. The merger documents, the unusual clauses, the insistence on specific terms. It all made sense now. Rachel's involved too, isn't she? Rachel, William laughed. Rachel Thompson is just another pawn, another signature we needed. The real power has always been elsewhere. Your father's company has something we want, something worth much more than its market value. As he spoke, William reached into his jacket. Ishaan tensed, expecting a weapon, but instead he pulled out a familiar-looking file. Your mother's research, he said, waving it tauntingly. The only copy left. Insurance, you might say, though I suppose now it's more of a farewell gift. He pulled out a lighter, holding it to the corner of the file, but before he could light it, a voice rang out from the temple entrance. I wouldn't do that, Mr. Parker. Everyone turned to see Raj, the temple's elderly caretaker, standing in the doorway. In his hands, he held a stack of papers. You didn't really think Priya Malhotra would leave only one copy, did you? Raj smiled gently. She was much smarter than that, much more careful. She left everything with me, her trusted friend, and Lakshmi's guardian all these years. William's face contorted with rage. He gestured to his guards, but before they could move, police sirens filled the air. Cars appeared at both ends of the street, lights flashing. Did I mention, Raj continued calmly, that I also served on Mumbai's police force for 30 years? Old habits die hard, like keeping evidence safe and making sure backup arrives on time. As the police moved in, William's guards looked uncertainly at their boss, then dropped their weapons. William himself stood frozen, the unlit file still in his hands. It's over, Ishaan said, stepping forward to take the file from William's unresisting fingers. The truth about my mother, about what you did, it all comes out now. As the police led William away, Ishaan turned to Lakshmi. She stood straight and proud, their mother's strength evident in her bearing. All these years, he said softly, you were so close in watching over me, just like she did. Someone had to, she replied with a small smile. You were so lost after her death, building walls around yourself, becoming something she never wanted for you. And now we honor her memory properly. We finish what she started. Raj approached them, holding out the stack of papers. Your mother left instructions, he said, for both of you. She knew this day might come. Inside the temple, as the chaos outside subsided, brother and sister sat together on the cool stone floor. Their mother's words, preserved on paper for all these years, finally revealed the full story, not just of corruption and betrayal, but of love, sacrifice and hope for her children's future. She wanted us to find each other, Lakshmi said, reading through tears. But only when the time was right, when we were both ready to understand. Ishaan reached for her hand, bridging years of separation with a simple touch. And now we have work to do. As they read their mother's final letters, plans began forming. William's arrest was just the beginning. There were others involved, more corruption to uncover, a company to redirect toward the ethical path their mother had envisioned. But more importantly, there was a family to rebuild. Outside, the sun had set completely, but the temple's ancient walls glowed with warm light. In the distance, Mumbai's modern skyline sparkled, a reminder of the two worlds that had finally merged through their mother's careful planning and their own journey toward each other. Raj watched them from the doorway, his heart full. Priya would have been proud to see her children together, her son finally awakening to the truth, her daughter's patient vigilance rewarded. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but they would walk it together, carrying their mother's legacy forward. "Your mother always said," Raj spoke softly, making them look up, "that love finds its way through the darkest nights. Even when it seems impossible, love guides us home." Ishaan and Lakshmi exchanged glances, seeing their mother's features reflected in each other's faces. They had found their way home, through years of separation and deception, guided by a love that had never died. The night deepened around the temple, but inside, a new day was dawning for the Malhotra siblings. Their mother's warning, delivered through years of careful planning and Lakshmi's brave intervention, had not just saved Ishaan's life, it had saved his soul, bringing him back to the path of compassion and justice that their mother had always walked. Together, they would ensure her sacrifice was not in vain. The truth she died protecting would finally see the light of day, and her children would carry forward her dream of a business empire built on integrity rather than greed. As they sat surrounded by their mother's words, both knew that this was just the beginning of their story. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Ishaan's office, illuminating the stark contrast between the siblings sitting across from each other, Ishaan in his tailored suit, Lakshmi in her simple sari, yet their shared determination bridged the gap between their worlds. "Rachel Thompson is waiting downstairs," Ishaan's assistant announced through the intercom. "She's demanding answers about William's arrest." Lakshmi straightened in her chair. "So are you ready for this?" Ishaan nodded, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. The company was in chaos following William's arrest. Shareholders were panicking, the press was circling, and longtime business partners were distancing themselves. Everything he'd built seemed to be crumbling. "Together," Lakshmi reminded him gently, echoing their mother's words from the letters they'd read. Rachel burst into the office before they could respond to the assistant. Her usual polished appearance was slightly disheveled, her eyes wild with confusion and anger. "What's going on, Ishaan? William arrested, the merger suspended, and who is she?" Rachel demanded, pointing at Lakshmi. "Sit down, Rachel," Ishaan said calmly. "There's something you need to know about the real purpose behind this merger." As Ishaan explained William's plot, Rachel's face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she reached for the evidence they'd gathered. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I thought this was just business. Good business." "That's what they wanted you to think," Lakshmi said softly. "Just like they wanted everyone to believe our mother's death was natural." Rachel looked between them, understanding dawning. "Your siblings?" "Yes," Ishaan confirmed. "And we're going to make things right, starting with this company." "But the shareholders," Rachel began, "will have to understand that we are choosing ethics over easy profits," Ishaan finished firmly. "It's what our mother would have wanted." Rachel sat back, processing everything. "What do you need from me?" "Your help," Lakshmi answered, surprising both Rachel and Ishaan. "Your company isn't tainted by William's corruption. Together, we could build something new, something better." Before Rachel could respond, Ishaan's assistant rushed in again. "Sir, there's a problem. Protesters have gathered outside the building. They're former workers from one of the factories, claiming they were unfairly dismissed years ago." Ishaan's face fell, another ghost from the past rising to haunt them, but Lakshmi was already standing. "I know these people," she said. "I've worked with them in the community. Let me talk to them." "It's not safe," Ishaan protested. "Trust me, brother, this is what I do." Minutes later, they watched from the office window as Lakshmi emerged from the building. The angry crowd fell silent as she approached. She spoke with their leaders, her gestures passionate but calm. To everyone's surprise, she invited them inside. "What are you doing?" Ishaan hissed when she returned with the protest leaders. "Showing you another way," she replied. "These people lost their livelihoods when the factory automated. They have skills, experience, and ideas for sustainable production methods. Listen to them." And so, in the same boardroom where million-dollar deals were usually discussed, Ishaan found himself listening to former factory workers share their vision for ethical manufacturing. Their passion reminded him of his mother's charity work he'd once dismissed as impractical. As the day progressed, something remarkable happened. Rachel's business acumen combined with Lakshmi's community connections and the workers' practical knowledge began forming into a viable plan, a way to modernize while preserving jobs, a path to profit that didn't sacrifice people. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. That evening, as they prepared to leave the office, Ishaan's assistant delivered an unmarked envelope. Inside was a photo of their mother, taken days before her death, with a message scrawled across it: "William wasn't working alone." Lakshmi's hand found Ishaan's as they stared at the threat. They'd known this might happen. William's arrest had only exposed the tip of the iceberg. "They're trying to scare us," Ishaan said. "They don't know us very well then," Lakshmi replied, a smile playing at her lips. "They didn't scare our mother, and they won't scare her children." But as they left the building under the protection of security guards, both siblings knew their challenges were far from over. Somewhere in their mother's papers lay more secrets, more names. Their task wasn't just to reform one company, but to expose a network of corruption that had already proven deadly. Back at Ishaan's penthouse, they spread their mother's documents across his living room floor. Rachel had joined them, her corporate expertise proving invaluable in understanding the complex paper trail. "Look at this," Rachel said, holding up a document. "These transactions, they're all routed through the same offshore account. An account controlled by—" She fell silent, her face paling again. "By whom?" Ishaan pressed. "By my father's company," Rachel whispered. "He's involved in this too." The revelation hung heavy in the air. Rachel's father was one of America's most respected business leaders. His involvement complicated everything. "I have to make a choice, don't I?" Rachel said quietly. Lakshmi moved to sit beside her. "We all do, every day, between what's easy and what's right." Rachel squared her shoulders, her decision made. "Then let's find them all, every last one." As night fell over Mumbai, the three of them worked on, piecing together the puzzle their mother had died protecting. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, while inside, a different kind of light grew stronger, the light of truth, of justice, of family bonds strengthened by shared purpose. But in the shadows, others were watching, planning. The game wasn't over yet, and the next move would test not just their courage, but their newfound trust in each other. Rain pounded against the windows of Raj's modest home, where Ishaan, Lakshmi, and Rachel had taken refuge after discovering their phones were being tapped. The small living room, filled with the scent of cardamom tea and wet earth, felt worlds away from the corporate offices they'd fled. "Your mother used to sit in that very chair," Raj said, watching Ishaan trace the worn armrest with his fingers, planning her charity projects, dreaming of a better future. "I remember," Ishaan said softly. "I used to think she was wasting her time. The business was what mattered, or so father always said." Lakshmi, arranging fresh flowers in a simple vase, caught his eye. "And now I understand why she fought so hard. It wasn't just about charity. It was about dignity, about seeing people as people, not numbers on a spreadsheet." Rachel looked up from her laptop where she'd been analyzing more of the documents they'd discovered. "Speaking of numbers, you need to see this, these transactions, and they're massive. My father's company was just a conduit. The real money leads to someone much closer to home." She turned the screen toward them, revealing a name that made Ishaan's blood run cold: Vikram Kapoor, his father's closest friend and business partner. "Uncle Vikram," Ishaan whispered. The man who'd been like a second father to him after his own father's death, who'd guided him through his early days of running the company, who'd given speeches at his business school graduation. He visited the temple last week, Raj said quietly, asking questions about you both. I didn't like the look in his eyes. Lakshmi moved to stand beside her brother, her hand finding his shoulder. It explained so much. He had access to everything. The company, our home, Mother's schedule. He was there, Ishaan remembered suddenly. The day before Mother got sick. They had an argument in her study. I heard them but didn't think anything of it at the time. A crash of thunder made them all jump. Rachel closed her laptop, her face grim. We have enough evidence to expose him, but we need to be careful. My father's involvement means this goes beyond Mumbai, beyond even India. This is international. We need to move fast, Lakshmi said, before they realize what we've found. But as she spoke, headlights swept across the windows. Cars were pulling up outside Raj's house. The back door, Raj said calmly, already moving. Through the temple grounds. Hurry. They grabbed what they could. The laptop, their mother's papers, a small box of photos Raj thrust into Lakshmi's hands. As they slipped out into the rain, voices could be heard at the front door. The temple grounds were dark, the ancient stones slick with rain. They moved carefully between shadowy sculptures and dripping trees, their hearts pounding with each flash of lightning. This way, Lakshmi whispered, leading them to a small door in the temple wall. The community built a network of passages years ago, during the floods. They lead to the old market district. As they hurried through narrow alleyways, Ishaan marveled at how well his sister knew these streets, this other world that had existed alongside his life of boardrooms and luxury cars, a world their mother had tried to bridge. They emerged into a busy street market, the rain doing nothing to dampen the evening crowd's energy. Here, they could blend in, become just more faces in the throng of shoppers and vendors. We need somewhere safe to examine these photos, Rachel said, huddled under a vendor's awning. Whatever's in that box, Raj thought it was important. Ishaan looked at his sister. The flower shop? Lakshmi shook her head. They'll look there first, but I know somewhere better. She led them through winding streets to a small restaurant, its windows steamy with the heat of cooking. Inside, an elderly woman looked up from behind the counter, her eyes widening at the sight of Lakshmi. Auntie, Lakshmi said in Hindi, we need help. The woman simply nodded, gesturing toward a curtained doorway. Beyond it, stairs led to a small apartment above the restaurant, simple but clean. I stayed here when I first came to the city, Lakshmi explained as they settled on the floor, spreading out their sodden materials. Auntie was one of Mother's dearest friends. The box of photos revealed their mother's foresight. Mixed in with family pictures were photographs of documents, business meetings, handshakes in shadowy corners. Their mother had been gathering evidence long before she'd discovered the full scope of the corruption. Look at this, Rachel said, holding up a photo. It showed Vikram with William's father, taken years ago. They've been working together for decades. And this, Lakshmi added, finding a series of pictures showing suspicious meetings at the temple. Mother was tracking their movements, using the community's eyes and ears. Ishaan stared at the images, his world shifting yet again. She built her own network, all those charity projects, all those connections in the community. They weren't just about helping people. She was creating a web of witnesses, of helpers. Like me, Lakshmi said softly. She placed me where I could watch, learn, and someday help you understand. A noise from downstairs made them freeze, but it was just the normal sounds of the restaurant. Still, they knew they couldn't stay long. We need to get these to the authorities, Rachel said, but not just any authorities. We need someone we can trust completely. I think I know someone, Lakshmi said. To a police inspector who used to help Mother, but first, she pulled out one last photo from the box. It showed their mother in this very room, sitting with the restaurant owner, writing something. The back of the photo had a message. When the time comes, ask Auntie about the spice box. They looked at each other, understanding dawning. Their mother's network was still active, still protecting her children, still fighting for justice from the shadows. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside, surrounded by their mother's legacy of love and courage, brother and sister felt stronger than ever. They had each other now, and an army of unlikely allies their mother had gathered over years of quiet resistance. Vikram and his conspirators might have wealth and power on their side, but the Malhotra siblings had something far more valuable, the truth, and an unshakable bond that grew stronger with each revelation. As Auntie brought them steaming cups of chai, her knowing smile reminded them that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from money or influence, but from the simple acts of kindness and courage that bind communities together. The next move would be theirs, and this time they would be ready. The spice box, as it turned out, held more than just their mother's favorite masalas. Hidden in a false bottom were banking records, photographs, and a USB drive containing everything needed to expose Vikram's entire operation. "Your mother was brilliant," Rachel said, reviewing the files on her laptop in Auntie's small apartment. "She didn't just document the corruption. She traced every rupees, every connection, every player in their game." Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving Mumbai's streets glistening in the pre-dawn light. Ishaan stood at the window, watching the city wake up. Beside him, Lakshmi arranged fresh flowers in a small vase, a habit, he'd learned, that helped her think. "We can't just hand this over to the authorities," Ishaan said. "Vikram has people everywhere. We need to make it public all at once so they can't bury it." "I know how," Lakshmi said quietly. "Mother's network. It's not just local. She built connections with journalists, activists, honest officials across multiple countries. All we need to do is activate them." Rachel looked up from her laptop. "My father needs to be exposed too, all of them. It's the only way to truly honor what your mother died protecting." A knock at the door made them all freeze, but it was just Auntie bringing more chai. Her weathered face broke into a smile as she set down the tray. "Your mother always said the truth was like the sunrise," she told them in Hindi. "You can try to hide from it, but it will find its way through every crack, every window, until the whole world is illuminated." As if on cue, Ishaan's phone buzzed, a message from Vikram himself, requesting an urgent meeting at the office. Alone. "It's a trap," Lakshmi said immediately. "Of course it is," Ishaan agreed. "But it's also an opportunity. While he's focused on me, you can activate Mother's network." "I'm not letting you face him alone," Lakshmi protested. "He won't be alone," Rachel interjected. "I'll go with him. Vikram won't suspect me. He still thinks I'm just a potential business partner." And so the plan was set. While Ishaan and Rachel headed to the office, Lakshmi began reaching out to their mother's contacts. Every person she called remembered Priya Malhotra and the kindness she had shown them. Each one agreed to help without hesitation. At the office, Vikram was waiting in the boardroom, his usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. The mask of avuncular warmth he'd worn for years had slipped, revealing something harder beneath. "Ishaan, my boy," he said, his voice straining for its old warmth. "I've been so worried. All these ridiculous accusations, these investigations. It's not good for the company, not good for your father's legacy." "My father's legacy?" Ishaan said quietly. "Or your exploitation of it?" Vikram's face hardened. "Be careful, boy. You're playing with forces you don't understand." "No, Uncle Vikram. I understand perfectly now, just like my mother did." The mention of Priya made Vikram flinch. Behind him, Rachel quietly pressed record on her phone, capturing everything. "Your mother was naive," Vikram snapped. "She thought business could be both profitable and pure. The world doesn't work that way." "You're wrong," Ishaan said. "She wasn't naive, she was brave. And she left us everything we need to prove what you did." Before Vikram could respond, his phone buzzed. Then again and again. His face went pale as he read the messages pouring in. Across the city and around the world, the evidence was being released. Journalists were publishing stories. Regulators were opening investigations. Police were moving to arrest conspirators. Their mother's network, dormant but never dead, had sprung to life with devastating efficiency. "It's over," Rachel said, stepping forward. "My father is already in custody in New York. William is cooperating with authorities." "You've lost?" Vikram lunged for his briefcase, but security guards, ones loyal to Ishaan, were already entering the room. As they led Vikram away, he turned to Ishaan one last time. "Your mother," he said, his voice breaking slightly. She would have changed everything. We couldn't let that happen. But in trying to stop her, we only made her vision stronger. She lives on in both of you. Later that evening, Ishaan and Lakshmi sat in their mother's favorite temple, watching the sunset paint the ancient stones in shades of gold. Rachel had returned to America to help prosecutors there, but not before promising to return and help them rebuild both companies the right way. "What do we do now?" Lakshmi asked, arranging flowers at their mother's memorial. "We honor her wishes," Ishaan replied. "Shall we bridge the two worlds she loved, business and community? We show that success doesn't have to come at the cost of compassion. Together, together." As darkness fell, brother and sister walked through the streets their mother had once walked. The same vendors and residents who had been part of her secret network nodded in recognition, sharing small smiles of victory. They ended up at Auntie's restaurant, where a special meal waited for them. The small space was filled with people from both their worlds, corporate executives and street vendors, bankers and temple workers, all brought together by Priya Malhotra's legacy of love and justice. Lakshmi looked around the room, then at her brother. "Mother always said that love finds a way." "And she was right," Ishaan replied, taking her hand. "It found a way to bring us together, to expose the truth, to change everything. The future would hold new challenges, they knew, rebuilding their father's company with ethical principles, maintaining their mother's network of community support, learning to be both siblings and business partners. None of it would be easy, but as they shared a meal with their unlikely family of allies and friends, they knew they would face it all just as their mother had taught them, with courage, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the power of love to bridge any divide. Outside, Mumbai's lights twinkled like stars, while inside, a brother and sister who had once lived in separate worlds celebrated their reunion and their mother's final, greatest victory, the triumph of truth over greed, of love over fear, of family over fortune. And somewhere, they knew, their mother was smiling. Thank you for watching this heart-stirring story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought of the story. Also, click on the video appearing on your screen to continue the journey with us. See you in the next story.